Welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 232, we welcome special guest Eddie Selover. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I'm the host and I'm here today in 818 Studios with my producer.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 232 of the Authentic Spiritual Journey. As always, I want to welcome you to a brand new week, and I want to say I hope you had a safe holiday weekend. The Christmas season is upon us. We put up our Christmas tree over the weekend. We're just going to do it early. We're going to make it a tradition. The weekend after Thanksgiving, We're going to put up the Christmas tree and just revel in holiday cheer. And I'm
You
I'm
guys
here
are
for
Christmas
it.
craze.
We are.
Christmas
We
craze.
are. Absolutely.
Well, and it is a great day because we have a special guest with us. I'm so happy, grateful, delighted that you're going to get to know this man. Eddie Selover is here, and I have been able to get to know him from a variety of places. So, Eddie, I really want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And we have several things in common. And as always, you know, our community is, as I mentioned to you before coming on air, our community has grown and we're all over the world. And I know your emphasis on connection, on inclusion, and the work you've done in Orlando has been pretty amazing. And for our listeners, I want to make sure they get to know you a little bit personally, because what the feedback we get is we love to hear how people who are successful in the world, what are they doing day to day, and how does their journey, inform what they do. But before we get into all that, Eddie, I really want to acknowledge you and your position, because if somebody looks you up, like on LinkedIn, one of the things they'll see is that Orlando Magazine called you one of the 50 most powerful people in Orlando. Whoa, that's quite a designation.
Yes, I that was a great honor. I'm not sure what it means to be that powerful, but
I know. Well, I think you've been influential, all the things you've done in Orlando. And where we met, of course, was at Pecha Kucha, and you're the host of Pecha Kucha. That's been it's been your baby. You've guided it, you've led it, you've supported it. It's been a personal commitment, a financial commitment, and it's brought leaders from Orlando together in a way that I think might not have happened had you not done that. And, also you're working in the business world, right? The vice president of communications at CapAcuity. So anyway, thank you for being here. And I wanted us to talk about that Pecha Kucha right away. So Eddie, we first tell our listeners a little bit about what is Pecha Kucha, because every time I say it, people say, "What are you saying?" I'm sure you've had to explain it 100 times.
Yeah, at least. And I have to say, I can't take credit for Pecha Kucha. Pecha Kucha was invented by a couple of architects, Mark Ditham and Astrid Klein, who they live and work in Tokyo. They're expatriates, and they have an architecture firm there, Klein Ditham Architecture, very successful, award-winning firm. Mm-hmm. And they originally wanted to give their fellow architects a forum to share their work. So they were concerned that people might hog the mic and chatter on for too long. So they developed a format where each presenter has only 20 slides, and the slides are on a timer for 20 seconds a piece, which kind of forces them through the hoops and makes them be succinct, get to the point. And so when they started this forum, that was the idea, give architects a chance to share. But it turned out that the format itself was so brilliant that once you started including other people, basically anybody has a story of some sort to share about what they do or who they are or what they've experienced. It doesn't really matter. The magic of the format is that it's a few things actually. The magic of the format is partly that it does force that concision and focus. But also, what they found and what I've found is when you do it in a theater and you have an audience, the audience is well aware that each speaker has exactly 6 minutes and 40 seconds and that each slide is going to be up for 20 seconds. And so normally when you're in an audience and you're watching someone give a presentation, particularly if they have PowerPoint, it's you don't know how long they're going to go on. Usually they go on too long. Usually they have words on their slides, which they read to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's pretty much a dreadful experience to watch somebody present a PowerPoint. and this, on the other hand, is very transformative because the awareness that the person is on a timer causes the audience to really lean in and listen very carefully, because if something's sort of whooshing by in 20 seconds, you want to make sure you get it. And then, there's that moment where the slide changes and you're also aware that the person didn't change the slide. So they're on the same journey you're on of like, oh, next, what do I say now? So it really keeps the audience on their toes and very attentive. And it's a really fascinating thing to watch 200, 300, 500 people, all of whom are paying very, very, very close attention to the same speaker. And I've never seen that happen at any other public speaking event in my life. So that's pretty much the power of the format and the event itself.
Yes, I agree. And as someone who spoke at Pecha Kucha, which was a transformative experience, because as a minister, the joke is never hand a minister a microphone, because definitely we're not known for our succinctness. So I appreciated the challenge of it, but I also appreciated the way you set up the entire experience. And that was one of the things that prompted me to contact you about an interview, because I was recognizing as we were meeting as a group, there, of course, with a format like that, especially with people who are not typically seasoned speakers, there's quite a bit of work to do. There's preparation, there's support. But in our practice sessions, I felt it was not just a practice session. I felt the session was more about connection, support, even I would say a spiritual experience, the way it was guided, because of the growth and development and, for lack of a better word, the evolvement of the participants. So what was going through, what were you setting up? Because it felt very, very intentional to me on your part in terms of taking people through those steps.
Yeah, I mean, there's several things that sort of made that happen. One is that the format itself is very strong, and it has an amazing effect of leveling out speakers. So I've had events where at the same event, one of the speakers was Jose Fajardo, who at the time was in charge of public television and radio in Central Florida, and obviously was an extremely accomplished and very polished speaker, and could talk anywhere to any audience of any size very smoothly. And on the same program, there was my friend Alexa, who talked about doing a mud obstacle race despite having asthma. And she was a very shy, very retiring kind of person. And she had never, ever spoken in public in her entire life. Not even once.
In her life, exactly.
Right. And she was on the program with Jose, and there was very little difference between them. And in fact, the audience loved Alexa and gave her a standing ovation because of the heart and the soul that, she put into what she had done.
Yes.
So the format does tend to level the speakers out. And then also, I've been to Pecha Kucha nights in other cities where they didn't do any kind of rehearsing or preparation. The speakers showed up with a thumb drive and handed it to the organizer, and then 10 people got up and just winged it. And I saw that
blew
worked
through it,
as well. So I knew that I had, thanks to Mark and Astrid, I had a I guess, a foolproof format for an event. But a couple things happened. One is the first couple times we did it, we didn't rehearse. I was a little overconfident, and it wasn't so much that the talks had troubles, but there were audio visual problems and other kinks to work out. Also, I remember my friend Steve had a talk about bicycles because he's a cyclist, and his slides were entirely of pictures of bicycles. And he got kind of thrown in the middle of his talk when he was delivering it live in front of the audience, like somewhere around slide, 9. He had been seeing so many different bicycles that he thought it was the wrong slide, which is impossible. But, it's an extremely disturbing thing to have your slides advance when you didn't do it. And so he looked at the screen and saw bicycles he wasn't expecting to see, and it sort of stopped him cold dead, and he said, "It's the wrong slide." And I, as the event organizer, knew it was not the wrong slide. So from the back of the room, I just yelled out, "Keep going." And he just got back up on his little bicycle and kept going, and it was fine. But I thought to myself, well, we really probably should rehearse this. Let's go through it together as a group.
Yeah.
Let's make sure everybody is comfortable.
Yeah.
And by the way, there was another speaker who I won't name at that first event. Very polished, he was our sort of get speaker. He was our big name, and he went first. And it was a train wreck because he had never done this before. So in front of an audience, his slides are changing and he's not ready for it. And he's still saying what he was saying 2 or 3 slides ago. And what's on the screen isn't matching what he's saying. And it quickly became a very hot mess on stage. So I felt, responsible for that. So I began to have rehearsals. That was step one. We just need to rehearse. But I think that I came to realize that from the audience's point of view, it's funny what an audience can sense. They can tell things that aren't necessarily, they can intuit things. And when the speakers know each other ahead of time and they've sat with each other through the process and held each other's hands and given each other feedback and worked together as a group, then when they get on stage together, it really makes it seem to the audience much more like a coherent single show that they're watching, rather than a series of 8 or 10 people getting up one after the other and just giving a talk.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was an important thing to do, to give it a cohesion and a kind of internal, I don't know what the word is exactly, but, make it all one thing instead of a fragmented thing.
Well, what I felt, I wanted to interject here because as a participant, what I felt is that we were somehow connected in this, desire to do it, to be competent, but also to get our message across. And because we had rehearsed together, and in the rehearsing, we were able to give each other constructive feedback. I mean, none of the feedback was, awful. It was obviously to make us better. And, it took a lot of vulnerability and a lot of trust. And for me, that's what life is about, is when we're in a safe container to grow, then growth happens pretty naturally. And I think that's what we saw in the process. And why, and of course, I'm only going on my group, but I felt my group in particular by the end was quite connected. And I've had several associations, even work connections with several people after that we just happened to circle back around and find each other in other settings. And I thought that was largely, because of that connection piece. So I think you're right. I think it really communicated to the audience, but I think it also connected us as people. And I think that we need more of that.
Yeah, exactly. And, it is getting up on stage with a set of slides that's on a timer, right?
Yeah, right.
It's a very daunting thing to do. And the bigger the stage, the more the pressure to sort of, deliver for, people who've paid $32 a ticket to come to the Dr. Phillips Center, dress up, come out on a Saturday night and
Right.
see a show, and you don't want to fail. So
Right.
I think of it often as like an athletic event. You have to prepare for it. You can't just drop in and do it. You have to get ready and train. That's what we did. We trained. And when you're training, with other people, you do kind of naturally tend to bond, I think. And I think also, some of the stories are very personal, and you're helping someone tell their story, which is also, it's an intimate kind of thing to be doing with someone.
I think it is. And it's so important, that experience. And I want to turn the light a little bit onto you, because the reason I think my experience was so good, I have spoken for years, and I did love the challenge. And I think it's, by the way, interesting that Dave's wife, Shannon, is the one that helped me with my slides for the event. She's very gifted in creating graphics, and Dave and Shannon were both there in support of me. But there's a term I've begun using, Eddie, with business leaders, and the term is enlightened leaders. And what I believe enlightened leaders are people that are doing their own self-work, which includes the work of the emotional nature. It includes, intellectual stimulation. It includes bringing our heart into our work. So we're not just, working from the mind and the ego, but that we're bringing something a little bit more expansive into our relationships. And the word spiritual was never mentioned in Pecha Kucha, but I had a sense as we went through that you've done a great deal of personal work. And so I'd love for you to talk about that in any way you're comfortable, because it really did come through to me in your leadership of that event.
Well, that's very lovely to hear. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that I have done a lot of work, that's for sure. And I'm not sure what that looks like on the front end, but I think that, and it's a blend of things, for over many, many years, different pieces. You sort of learn, I think, what you need to learn at the moment. Just like let's say a baby learning to walk. First it has to crawl. First it has to sit up, then it has to get on its hands and knees and crawl a bit and make some mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what a spiritual journey is a bit like.
Yeah.
And I think that, one thing that where business and spirituality intersect, for one thing, is learning, I think, along the way with help from others, that you can confront people without being hostile, and you can tell people the truth in a dispassionate way that isn't really about them as a person.
It's not an attack. It's feedback. It's information. Yeah.
Right. We're very, very afraid of confrontation. And we really do confuse it with hostility and think that, okay, I can't confront this person until I'm so mad that, I'm going to yell at them and I'm put them in their place or tell them how it is. And when you come at somebody with that kind of mindset, what happens is they get very defensive very quickly, and they'll begin to put all their energy into defending themselves instead of addressing the issue. And so one thing I think that I've learned to do, and it would happen in giving feedback with Pecha Kucha, is that it was very dispassionate and objective. And like, this point you're making here isn't coming across clearly. And, here's an idea for making it clearer. Or asking questions too. Is this what you're trying to say here? Or what are you trying to do here?
Right.
Trying to, one thing I learned through learning to meditate is the difference between curiosity and judgment. Right. And I grew up with very, very judgmental parents, unusually judgmental. And I absorbed that. And I tend to be very judgmental. And when I began to meditate, I realized that in meditation, you're essentially developing a quality where people think, let me just digress for a second and say,
sure, go ahead.
People who don't meditate, there's a widespread, I think, misconception that it's about peace and love and getting peaceful. And I don't really think that's what meditation is or is about. I think it's like training a dog, basically, where the dog is on the leash and it's barking at squirrels, and you're gently, if you're doing it correctly, you gently but firmly correct the dog, and you pull the leash back till they're back walking with you.
Yes.
And you do that over and over and over consistently until the dog just doesn't have any more options and is not chasing squirrels anymore, because it knows that as soon as it has that impulse that it's going to be back walking. So it short circuits its own tendency and just walks anyway. And that's what meditation does for your mind, because your mind is chasing squirrels all the time. 24/7 of various kinds. And when you meditate and you focus on your breath and you bring your mind back to your breath, you're doing the same exact thing that you'd be doing with that dog. So the thing that meditation does for you is it teaches you that what's chasing the squirrels is your ego, right? Which your ego wants to know what's going to happen, anticipate it, get ahead of it, and deal with it. And the fact is, it's good that your ego thinks it knows what's going to happen next, because that takes a lot of, work out of daily life.
Right.
You don't want to think about every single little thing. How do I crack an egg? How do I make an omelet? How do I eat? How do I chew? There's a lot of stuff that it's labor saving. But the problem is that your ego thinks it knows everything and decides ahead of time. And meditation teaches you to be curious. And I realized at a certain point that you cannot be judgmental and curious at the same time. Judgment is a sort of end to curiosity. Judgment's saying, I already know. I know. You're an and I know that, or you're this kind of person, you're that kind of person. I know what you're going to say next. And meditation opened up a sort of field of curiosity where the realization comes, they call it beginner's mind. It's like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And so your judgment kind of fades away.
Yes, and moving into that space of I don't know is actually a real place of power. And I think you're absolutely right about what meditation does. It's training wheels for the mind. It keeps it going the right direction rather than scattering off and figuring out everything in advance and all that future casting, which actually keeps us out of the present moment, right? So that's the other piece I think that meditation does for me, is it helps me stay more present, and then I can be curious, as you say. And I totally agree about judgment. As soon as you're in judgment, it's over. It's there's nothing new to be learned when you go to judgment.
Yeah, it's a dead end.
It's a total dead end.
And the ego finds it very confusing to think, like you said, I forget how you put it exactly, but you said not knowing is a place of power.
Yeah, moving into I don't know. Yeah,
right. That's a very confusing thing to say to an ego, right?
Totally.
How can that be a place of power?
I want to know, right?
Yeah, not knowing sounds like powerlessness to the ego.
Yes. Well, to the right. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say where I think that where the power comes in is left to its own devices. What happens to people is that their mind becomes a kind of machine that generates thoughts, and then it views the world a certain way, and it thinks what it's seeing is reality, which may not necessarily be the case. It's not reality we're seeing. It's a sort of refracted set of assumptions that we're filtering in through our training and our predispositions and our presuppositions. So we think we're seeing reality, but we're really not. We're seeing what we think we're going to see, right? So if you tend to see the world as a threatening place, you're going to reframe everything that happens to you in terms of threats. You're going to see a lot of threats. And that's maybe part of the truth, but that's not the entire truth. And where it really gets in your way is when you start seeing threats where there are no threats, or you see someone
Yes.
trying to help you as a threat. So that's number
Yes.
one. And then number
Mhm.
two is that we have a sort of automatic response system where it's like, okay, now that I've seen a threat, here's what I do. And I do
Mhm.
these things. So it's this, the expression about how a stopped clock is right twice a day. That's how the ego works generally. It's occasionally right. And that's enough for it to go, wow, I'm right. Well, I was wrong all these other times. Well, that doesn't count.
Right.
I was right about that threat. So
Yeah.
I'm justifying continuing to have a threat kind of consciousness, right?
Yes. And I think that the part of the journey for me has been, really, yes, understanding how the ego wants to work and how the mind just is constantly thinking and judging. And then it's like my soul working with the ego in managing my emotional nature so that I can go through life and, not be in reaction mode all the time. For me, that's really the greatest gift of meditation for me is being able to quiet my mind enough that I'm not going into reaction mode, that yes, I'm curious, I'm asking questions. And most of those questions, of course, are self-reflective questions. I still find myself at times, this happened to me several years ago with a dear mentor of mine, and I can't remember even what she asked. And I flew into my manic defense so quickly. And she started laughing and said, "You do know I'm trying to help you, right? Like you're paying me to help you." And I was like, "Oh," you know. So then the work over the next couple of weeks became, where was that? Where was that? Hot point? Where was that trigger point in me that I couldn't just hear that as a supportive question? So it took a bit and I got to dial it through. And so as we're saying this, I hope our listeners are thinking about, oh, wow, in that work situation, I really overreacted. Or with my partner, my loved one, I really went into reaction mode. I wasn't really aware of what my mind was doing. So I hope that's what our listeners are doing as we're saying this, because as you're saying it, Eddie, I'm thinking, oh yes, I could be a little more curious there.
Well, it's tricky, right? Because
Yeah,
it's there are no quick fixes to any of this.
that's exactly
It
right.
really takes a long time. Like Marianne Williamson in one of her books says, if you're on a true spiritual journey, the first 10 years of it are going to be you having these successes and overcoming yourself
Yeah,
a little bit. And you're going to go,
yeah,
woohoo, woohoo, this is great. I'm fast tracking to bliss. And then the next 10 years, you are going
yeah,
to like get your ass handed to you.
yeah,
And it's going to be so difficult and painful that you can't even
yeah,
believe it. And I think one hallmark of being on a real spiritual journey and having real spiritual growth is that it is very, very painful at times and
yes,
very uncomfortable. And you're
yes,
forced to look at who you really are and how you really behave versus your self-conception or the sort of, perfumed, edited version of yourself that you
yeah,
like to think about.
yeah. Your
Or
social media version.
or the version in your head where you're sort of like,
Oh
these
yes,
are my intentions. My intentions are so good that I should be judged by those. And it's like, if you look around at other people, you're not judging them by their intentions. Usually you're judging them by
yes,
their actions.
right, right.
And that's what it is. It's what are you actually doing, not what you think you're doing or what's your imaginary self.
Right. There's another show on our channel that is hosted by Dr. Donna Bevan Lee, and she is an amazing therapist with over 40 years experience in the field, and she specializes in recovery. And one of the things she says is we're not responsible for our thoughts and feelings, but for what we do and say. And so, we all have feelings come up. Well, then we deal with those before the words and the actions come out. And I'll tell you, that has been a driving mantra in my life for 30 years. And it's one, I think, if the world, these are the thoughts I have. If the world would just wake up to that one idea, life would get better. immeasurably better overnight if we just were beginning to be more responsible with what we do and say. The world would be a better place. So,
Right.
go ahead.
It's what does an infant do, right? An infant has no resources and has no
Right.
words, but it knows that something just happened that it doesn't like. So what does it do? It yowls, it yells,
right,
cries, it protests on the assumption that if it yells and protests enough, the thing will stop. And that is unfortunately, I think, where a whole lot of people are still operating. Basically, on that level of, I don't like this thing that just happened. I don't understand why it happened. I don't see any connection between what I did and it happening. But I know I don't like it, so I'm going to raise a stink and yell and scream and make my displeasure known and hope that that causes whoever or whatever started this to stop. And that is really, it's a pretty sad way to go through life, like a baby.
Right. It's not the end game, right? And that's what we're trying to keep track of is, there's a more expansive way to be, and that's why our show exists, is to inspire people to at least seek this path, to try this path, and to see what more, there is for us. And in terms of that, I know we're almost out of time, Eddie, and I wanted to think about for you, what's next for you? You're doing this great work, at CapAcuity, and I know you're vice president of communications there. What's next on your plate, and what can we, how can we support your journey going forward? What's next for you?
Yeah, thanks. I think that right now, we did a couple of, when the pandemic hit, we couldn't do live events. So we did a couple of Pecha Kucha nights over Zoom and YouTube.
Zoom,
And it was, aside from the fact that, the event costs money to put on, even if you're not in a theater. And it didn't really make any money online. It also was, being disconnected from that audience that's hanging on our every word was very alienating, and it didn't feel right. And it didn't feel right to me. There have been, Tokyo, Mark and Astrid in Tokyo did a lot of worldwide, live via Zoom Pecha Kuchas, and they were great. But I just missed that audience connection. And I did one live in 2021 after having been away for a year, and or 2 years. I'm losing track of time now.
I know. COVID did that to all of us. We were in a time warp.
Yeah. So anyway, we did it live again, and it didn't, nobody came. It was very lightly attended. And again, it lost money.
Yeah.
So I think I'm sort of waiting till the time is right and people really come back out and feel good about going to live events, being crowded into a theater. And also, coincidentally with that, I finding myself at home a lot more. I decided to finally write a book. I'm fundamentally a writer and an author, but I have always been a professional writer for corporations, and occasional, blogging or article writing.
Right.
But I never wrote a book. So I thought, this is probably a good time. I'm home anyway. And so, I started writing a book. It's a biography of the actor Basil Rathbone, who played Sherlock Holmes in the 1940s. And it's, there have only been a couple of books about him in, the last 50 years, neither of which I was particularly impressed with. And so it's one of those things where you create the thing that you wish was out in the world. I always wanted there to be a well done, insightful book about him and his life. So I decided to do it. Nice. So I've been working on that since December. It's probably going to take another year and a half, maybe a little more.
Yes. But writing is such a process. That is awesome. And so we might see that in the next couple of years, you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking 2024. I have a contract with a publisher, and the agreed date for me handing the manuscript is early 2024. And, I don't know how anybody writes a book because it is very labor intensive.
It is.
And I'm a professional writer. It's not the writing that's time consuming. It's the research to do a biography, to find,
Yeah.
And again, it sort of relates back to what we were talking about, because when you're doing a biography of a person, there's this sort of there's the public story of them.
Yes.
And then there's the private story that they're telling.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the real story, which is far more ambiguous, and it's not either of those stories. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's you can have for example, you can have a letter that the person you're writing about wrote to their wife, and they're saying things, and your impulse is to say, well, he's telling his wife, it must be true. But you can learn enough facts to know, well, actually, he's not saying the truth to his wife. He's leaving a lot of important things out.
Right.
He's slanting it a certain way. And even though I have in his handwriting his words, that isn't necessarily the truth, which makes it a very tricky, delicate path to walk.
Yes, so you have to be your own Sherlock Holmes to go through it, huh?
Nice callback there.
Well, that is awesome, Eddie. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm honored to know you and have you, in my circle. And we're here to support your journey. And I'm glad our listeners got to hear a little bit about both your journey and Pecha Kucha. And our hope, dear friends, as you're hearing all this, is that, as you listen, you're applying it to your own life. You're seeking clarity and inspiration in your own journey. And that's what we're here for. We do thank you for your support. We are going to be starting a new financial campaign coming up, $9,000 in 90 days. And so that's going to be fun. We'll tell you more about that next show. But Eddie, as always, thank you for being here. What a gift you are in Orlando. And I'm sure you are, in your work setting. And I've been honored to know you as a leader in Orlando. So thanks for being here. And dear listeners, thank you as always for your support, for your love, and for being a part of our family at the Authentic Spiritual Journey. So blessings on the journey, dear friend, and we'll see you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2022, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Thank you for listening to the show today, dear friends. I'm always happy to have you along the journey. If you're seeking deeper work, though, I'm going to invite you into one-on-one coaching with me. In my coaching work, I get to glean from my over 30 years of experience of working with individuals and leaders in the community on their spiritual journey. So I have a wealth of information that will help you along the journey, and it will be supportive. It will be supportive of your dreams, goals, and desires, but it will also be confrontive, because I am going to help you confront those limiting patterns and beliefs and help you break through those aspects and move into looking at life in a more holistic way. So even though it will be confrontive and at times even challenging, you will learn to grow, you will learn to prosper, and you will evolve into the person you have always wanted to be. Friends, the answers lie within you, and I am so honored to help empower you to live that truth and that goodness in the world. If you want to learn more about coaching with me, simply go to CynthiaAliceAnderson.com and go to the coaching section for more information. That's CynthiaAliceAnderson.com and go to coaching, and I'll be happy to set up a one-on-one call so we can discuss how I can best support your journey. Thanks again for joining me today, dear friend, and blessings on the journey.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The SoulWorks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. SoulWorks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the SoulWorks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.